Hi, I'm Scott Monson, Superintendent in the Marshall Public School District, and I have the privilege today to, as part of Tiger Talk TV, to talk to some of our staff members about a new initiative that we've started, I'll say recently, but I'm going to let you ladies talk about that. CEM it's called, and we'll probably touch on some other things. Really focusing on the importance of early childhood education in general, and just trying to update our viewers in terms of some of the things happening in our district relative to that. So Tiffany, I'm going to ask you to start, and we'll go right down the line and just introduce yourself and talk a little bit about how long you've been in the district and what your role is, please.
Great. My name is Tiffany Teskey, and I'm the Early Childhood Coordinator, and I've been with the district now for 3 years.
I'm Deb Pischke. I'm one of the preschool teachers, and I have been in the district over 10 years.
I am Jennifer Hansen. I am one of the early childhood special ed teachers. I teach 3 to 5-year-olds, and I've been in the district 13 years.
And I'm Emily Hoffman. I'm an early childhood special education teacher. I'm also the internal coach for the CEM Innovation, and this is my 4th year in the district.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies. So we have a lot of experience in some different areas that we can talk about, but when Tiffany and I were sort of trying to brainstorm what we might talk about and share with our viewers, CEM came up, and I think there's been a name change with that, and honestly, not a lot of us know what that is. So what does it stand for? And whoever wants to answer that is free to go ahead.
I'll take that one.
Because you know the answer.
Yay. So it used to be called RP squared, and now it's called CEM, and that stands for Classroom Engagement Model.
Okay.
And we are in year 2 of year 5 of our innovation or implementation. And we were lucky enough to be chosen as a district to pilot this program through the state of Minnesota.
And CEM, and again, all of you ladies can answer this. If you were to, if somebody was to come up to you and say, what does it mean? Because it's, you can say classroom engagement model or RP2, different things, but what does it mean? I mean, what does it mean to each of you? And you're in a little different areas, so how does it, all fit together too? But let's just talk briefly about that if you'd like.
For me, it's like the engagement model within the classroom, and just kind of making sure that every child is engaged in an activity, because we know when they're engaged, they're learning.
Okay.
So we try to keep them involved, even at circle time when they're supposed to be, listening to a story. Well, we help them by handing out props or something, doing something with the story so they can keep engaged with it.
So very focused on engaging young learners in this
everyone.
case. Yep.
I think one of the things that, since I've been involved with doing CEM in the classroom, that I've noticed is that just taking all of those little parts of the day that you thought maybe kids were learning and were really engaged, and really taking a look at, okay, how many students really aren't paying attention, aren't learning that at that point of the day, and then figuring out how can we make that a different experience for those kids, and what little thing can we tweak that does make all 15 students involved instead of maybe 10 of them.
And in a lot of cases, we don't have these youngest kiddos for very long, so it's really important that we maximize and engage them as much as possible. So.
We have our kiddos 3 hours, 2 times a week, so a maximum of 6 hours when some students are staying in class a full day, 1 day. So yeah, to make sure all those little pieces, it's a big thing.
Absolutely. Emily, anything you'd add?
For me, a big part of CEM has been just how intentional it makes the teachers and reflective, and just very intentional about how the adults in the classroom are engaging with the students, not only how the students are engaging with the materials and their peers, and then also just how much it's increased independence between the students in the class and the routines, and just creating those social relationships between peers.
And the reflective piece is really interesting, because a lot of times it seems like in education, if we're not sort of forced to do it, maybe as a part of the program or the grant or whatever, it doesn't happen quite as much. So I'm glad that you touched on that. You alluded to it a little bit earlier, Tiffany, but how'd this come about? How did CEM happen in our district? What did we have to do, and why did we do it? Maybe that's an even better question. And again, all of you ladies are free to weigh in on that.
Well, I think across the state of Minnesota, the state was looking for what are some really positive teams that are working together. The early childhood general ed teacher and the early childhood special ed teacher, and they were able to kind of focus on Marshall. We've got a good reputation that they really collaborate well together, so this would be a good model. And with our different demographics, the size of our district, they chose us, and we were lucky enough to be chosen. And then with that, they gave us funding for 5 years. Each year it goes down to a place where after 5 years we need to have everything that we've implemented be able to self-sustain. So year one we were given $15,000,
Okay.
which is really a huge, nice benefit. But what's greater than the financial grant is the coaching. The professional development that we've been able to receive through each of our staff has been priceless. Because right now, in year two, every staff member that wasn't trained in a 5 full-day training last year is going to Mankato and getting trained this year.
Great.
And all of the cost is being taken care of. So we're, again, very, very lucky.
Anything else?
I think a huge piece of that training is that it's not just a couple of us teachers going and being trained and then having to come back and try to explain to everybody else what we're doing, is that it's the paras, the assistants, the OT, the PT, the speech, and the teachers all getting trained, so we're all on the same page and we're all hearing it in the same way.
Very
And at the
consistent.
same time, so we don't have, there's not that delay in,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I have to tell you what I learned at that conference last week.
Absolutely. Yeah. Is this a state program, or is this the grant, or a federal, or maybe it's a little bit of both?
It is a state program.
Okay.
It's through the Centers for Excellence.
So, okay, Regional Centers for Excellence, awesome. So if I was to walk into a classroom that didn't use CEM and one that did, what's happening for students that's different in a CEM classroom because of all the training and great experiences that you folks have talked about?
We hope lots of things.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. What are some specifics that we might see, though?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, I think just teachers being more intentional about what they're doing. A lot of these are things we've done for years, but now it has a name, and now we're planning and we're teaming. The entire team is on the same page. We can look across the classroom and, kind of be on the same page and kind of share that nonverbal, just understanding of what's happening in this moment and why we're doing it.
I think one thing too that might be noticed is we have what we call zone defense, I guess, in a way, in our classroom. So we've got our classroom broken up into 4 different zones, and each adult has a zone, and that is what your responsibility is, where you stay, which sounds kind of not traditional to what we're used to in education. But then kids can go in and out of the zones independently as they need, but then instead of a teacher coming from across the room to go help another student that might need assistance, you're in that zone to take care of the students that are there working with you. Someone else is in another zone taking care of the needs of children in that zone. So it flows really well. It seems more organized. I don't know, it really seems to work well in our classroom.
And you call it zone defense?
We call it zones, yep.
I like it.
Zones.
Very neat.
I don't think we came up with the name, but we'll take credit.
Absolutely.
There's another thing too with just, one reason it was called RP squared was it was routines within routines within routines. And just choosing a routine and then digging deeper into that routine, like when we would pick up the toys, not only would the children have to pick up the toys, but then sometimes there's also labels on the blocks, like you have to match the square ones on the square or the rectangle ones. So then they're getting that matching part of it too. And even at circle time, you're doing it the same way over and over. So you're doing a routine because it's consistency, and then they know what to expect.
A little bit more learning taking place, that engagement piece that you're talking about. So I would hope that you have plenty of time to meet with everybody like you talked about. And I don't know specifically how many people that this involves, but Do you have, Emily, I think you mentioned you're a peer coach, is that correct? Can you talk a little bit about what you do and how that relates to CEM?
Yep, so like you said, I'm the internal coach, and this year I have 3 different coachees, and they're all teachers, 2 special ed teachers and then 1 general ed teacher. And I meet with them every other week about, depending on our schedule, but I'll observe for about 20 to 30 minutes. And it's a very structured observation based on an action plan that we've created. And then after that, we do a debriefing. So then we'll have a reflective conversation and we'll problem solve together. I can provide resources and kind of tweak the action plan as needed, just so that we can know going forward exactly what we need to do to hopefully reach fidelity of these strategies that we're trying to implement.
So would you ever coach one of these 2 ladies?
Yes, I'm actually coaching both of them.
And how do you feel about that? What do you 2 get out of that? I mean, it's kind of to some extent, it's not new in the Marshall Public Schools, but this is maybe something that's on a little more widespread basis than what you're used to. So how does that work?
It's nice to have an outside perspective, because sometimes as you go through your day as a teacher and you think you're doing everything, you're the routines within routines, there's always something that we know we're missing, and it's nice to have that outside perspective of, have you thought about this? Or those action plans, it's nice, think, okay, well, this, let's make a deadline, let's get that done. What else? And really it's about what else can work better for us in our classroom. It's not necessarily Emily coming in and saying, I think you should do this. It's really, us trying to figure out what we do still need in our classroom.
And just coming from that outside perspective, as she has so many different ideas and ways of doing things. And it's like, oh yeah, that makes lots of sense. Let's try it that way.
And a huge part of it is that I'm not there to evaluate, I'm not there to criticize, I'm just there to support, to guide, to kind of help them identify what their needs are and what they think they could benefit most from.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So it sounds like a real collaborative, sort of a team approach, and again, that's not new, but it just sounds like it's really working well. How, you talked about action plans and some follow-up. Who's responsible for that, or is there like a leadership team, or Tiffany has her arm around her,
So there's
think
2
that's-
different action plans.
Okay.
We have action plans for our leadership team, but then the coachees and the teams have their own action plan. So within each classroom, the classroom team is responsible for different items on their action plan.
And the team would be each of the folks that are in the different zones,
From the different
which is all
classrooms.
staff who have been trained on.
Yep, and anyone who is coming in and out of the classroom, whether it's speech, OT, PT.
Sure.
So,
Okay,
Yeah.
great. How, these are our youngest students, obviously, and admittedly, with a high school background, this would be scary for me, but how do you engage young children? I mean, you gave, I think, a couple good examples already, but what are some of the strategies that you've really seen a lot of success with? And it doesn't necessarily have to be just as part of CEM, but in general, what are some things? And I guess I'd like to talk about these because hopefully parents can pick up on this too that might be watching the show. So would you share that?
I think that you shared a little bit on the consistency
Yep.
piece, because children like predictability. They thrive on knowing what's going to be happening next, because as soon as they're comfortable in an environment, they can relax and their brains are ready to be opened and take it all in. So if we're providing them a very structured setting, meaning that they know every day that they're going to come in, they're going to open their backpacks, take out their folder, put in a special container. They know those 3 steps. So then if we add an embedded piece to learning, instead of just that, we're going to add a greeter. So that greeter's job for the day will be to welcome the students. And they're going to practice a conversation, which you and I take for granted, but young children need to be taught these things.
Sure.
So they're going to practice making eye contact. They're going to practice saying each other's names, saying good morning, hello, maybe even a handshake. So in just that one little piece of 5 minutes, we've already given so many different skill sets, which are part of the early childhood indicators of progress, which are our state standards. Even for young 3-year-olds, we have that. So I think that's one of the biggest pieces. It's just we make sure that everything is intentional. But every minute of their day, I could tell you something different that they're teaching students, and it is really amazing. And I just have to give a lot of props to each of them.
Just to see them all engaged in something and lots of hands-on activities. If they can feel it and touch it and maneuver it around, it's great for them. That's how you keep them occupied. Some kids at circle time won't sit still, so you give them these little bubble things that they can look at. And they're sitting quietly, it's just they can't just totally focus, so they need just a little bit of extra hands-on little fidgets.
Sure, absolutely.
For me, one of the strategies I've seen to be one of the most effective in engaging students is what we call peer-mediated strategies. So just using peers, giving them a job that traditionally the teacher might have, passing out materials, picking up materials, holding some assistive technology for a student who might not be verbal, or even just giving prompts to other students. Come here, stand up, sit down. We find that students are more likely to listen to their friends rather than an adult.
And it's interesting because we found lots of little ways throughout our day that students can do those jobs.
Sure.
It doesn't always have to be us. One of the big things is when they come in, our class has to move their name on the smart board so we know they're there. One of us is up in the zone, supporting them up in that role, but then they have to go tap a friend on the shoulder, make the eye contact. It's your turn, go move your name, because those are all things that our 3-year-olds are working on too, and that's now become their job instead of our job to call somebody up. So it's a little thing, but they're huge in the big scheme of things.
Yep, little things do make a big difference, and it sounds like those are some of the major changes, if you will, that you've really been focusing on and helping students with. Talk about transitions a little bit, and I've heard, and we've talked about consistency and just how students do like consistency. So when you transition from one lesson or activity to another, that can be challenging for younger kids. It can be challenging for high school kids. We admittedly, it can be challenging for me and probably all of us. But how does CEM help with that? How does it fit into that?
So one of our big focuses, we have 4 questions that we always want students to be able to answer. What am I doing? What's coming next? How do I know I'm making progress? And how do I know I'm finished? And when they can answer all of those questions, they are likely to be independent, successful, and less likely to be distracted by other things.
Wow.
So we try to build those into all of our transitions.
And these are 3-year-olds.
3s, 4s, and
4s
5s.
and
4s and 5s,
Yeah.
but I mean as young as
Right,
3.
yeah.
And they're, I'd be curious, how have they adapted to those questions? I'm sure it's a progress thing.
It's a
but-
progress thing, some better than others.
Yeah.
But, I mean, there's, like I'm thinking when we transition to our small groups, we come back to circle, we have a little discussion, it's called a recall. They share a little bit about what they did, what they liked. And then we break up into 2 small groups, and it's a very simple, quick thing. They get a colored stick, they go to the table that has the colored sign with the colored baskets, and they go to their table, they go to their group. They know where to go.
Mhm.
That's all it takes,
So
because they
using
can look
little-
at their stick.
Well, using little things, we use like little popsicle sticks that are colored different colors, or bean bags is a good one. They line up with bean bags, and then when they get to the gym, they have to throw their yellow bean bag in the yellow hoop, and then they can go sit or stand where they need to, where they're told. So they always have something in their hand. They're always maneuvering something.
Which keeps them more on task and more successful, because they aren't touching the next person in front of them.
And there's not that wait time.
Right. It goes, they have a job to do, and they know they have a job to do, so they feel empowered. And we're embedding color recognition as well. So if they've got red, goes to the red, yellow goes to the yellow. And I think that's, even sometimes I've heard them sing, put the beanbag on your head. So we're doing body part recognition. So again, There's no wait time, and they're moving right into the next thing, and you've embedded all of that instruction in just that one little transition.
So they don't even really know they're learning, but they're learning, and they're
Right.
engaged in their
Exactly.
learning.
And it's all about play, too. I feel that so many times, if we can make it purposeful play,
Mhm.
that's what preschool's all about.
Very, very interesting. So not just teachers, you talked about assistants and maybe there might be a paraprofessional or paraeducator. Other service providers, how do they fit into this? We have certainly special education teachers, speech, language pathologists, maybe counselors, different things like that. How do all those positions blend in with this? How does it work?
To me, that's the best, one of the highlights to classroom engagement model too, is because we've changed the roles of what was typical in the past, where usually a service provider would pull a child out for, let's say, speech, for example, or PT or OT time. Now we're pushing in.
Mhm.
So as much as possible, we're pushing them into the classroom. We're not only giving the opportunity for that provider to work with just that one child, but maybe a small group of children, and for the teachers to learn from that service provider.
Sure.
And that's a way for us to embed it, because typically you've got a service provider there for maybe 20 minutes of that time. Well, if they can learn what that speech teacher or OT or PT teacher is doing, they can then use it for all students later on throughout the day. And the more time the young children have to practice that same
Yep.
skill, the better that they will be, hopefully.
It's almost reinforcement, if you will.
Mhm.
Is this, many of you have been in our district and in education for a long time, or several years. How do you feel in terms of the new things that have kind of come along? How do you feel this ranks, or where do you feel this ranks in terms of how much you enjoy it and how much impact you've seen in terms of the education that's provided to the youngsters?
I really enjoy it because not only, like during gym time, not only am I sharing with the kids, let's run to the other end, but I have the PT person in there that's watching their certain children, and then they can give me ideas too on how to work with the other ones. So, and I love that piece about just learning from that other professional. I like having them come in rather than just pulling out. It took a little bit to get used to, but once you get used to it, and once everybody has the buy-in with it about coming in, I really enjoy that piece of it.
And I think just CEM in general, not that there's not some work up front that you have to put into it, that is more work with anything.
Yep.
But in some respects, it lets everyone have the responsibility of the classroom. The paras, the OTs, the speech. When you're in that classroom, everyone has a role, and I don't want to say it takes some of the pressure off, but knowing that as the teacher, you don't have to be the it person to everybody, that everybody has that role, and they're very capable of that role, and when they know what their role is and what their job is in your classroom, it makes everybody's job just better.
And it flows a lot
Yeah.
easier.
I feel like our classroom flows, we co-teach 2 mornings a week, and I think the flow of our classroom is just much different than I think it was at the beginning of last year when we hadn't started implementing things yet.
So Emily, let's get that question in a moment. Can we talk about the co-teaching piece for a second? That's very interesting. And again, some folks may not know what that means or looks like, so how would you explain that? As
Well,
they giggle.
I am what they call the general ed teacher. So I have no special ed education background. However, I have learned so much about special education in the last 10 years just from being involved in having kids in my class. And now to be able to have half of the class as being your typical learning students,
Your peer models.
your peer models. And then you have the other half.
About half that are on IEPs.
Sure.
And we plan together, we teach together, we take turns because we have zone defense, so some days she's the show, some days I'm the show. It works really well. The bonus is we've got 2 licensed teachers in the classroom
Yeah.
with those students. The benefits are huge, I think, because it brings both of our expertise. We have 15 kids this year. Last year we had 16. But I mean, I don't know, the benefits.
There are
It's
so
great.
many.
We like it. Yeah, it's great. I just think that there's so many things that
And you
we
can
can bring to
bounce an
those
idea,
students.
ideas off of another teacher that knows what you're going through.
Right,
because
not just
they're
the
in there too.
collaboration, but just the ability to work with 16 students and have that support in the classroom to be teaching. I don't know. It's just great. I don't know.
Those that don't have it want it. Because they see what can happen when you have 2 brains working together and to work together, and the greatness that is happening in those co-teaching our classrooms. So, good things.
Yeah, I would think you would learn a lot from each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do.
Whether you're working together or, like you said, in your own zone, kind of doing your own thing or whatever. So very neat. That's good. Emily, let's come back to you now with the previous question.
So you had mentioned, how does CEM fit in with what we've always done and different innovations that have come through in the past? Another innovation we started trying, how many years ago? Maybe 7?
Taxi?
Yeah. It's now called the pyramid model. It used to be called TAXI, and it's very focused on social emotional skills. And this fits right up there with it. So engagement, helps with independence, helps with social relationships, in turn, really strengthens those social emotional skills. So I felt like those 2 innovations have really fit nicely together.
Interesting. We're just about out of time, I think, but are there closing comments that you'd like to make, or little messages, if you will, for our folks who might watch this, to help them remember something about CEM and just sort of leave them with any particular message or anything in general that you'd like to share in closing?
If you have a child at home between the ages of, 2 and 5, especially the little learners, have them be the adult or something sometime. Have them, they can help participate in things. We give our kids the jobs that they do. It makes them feel really special that they can help with that. Lots of hands-on activities, giving them props or something they can hold.
Creates independence. I think that's a huge thing, is that with our CEM model, we're creating independent learners, independent little 3 and 4-year-olds who are not necessarily dependent on us all the time when they are very capable of some of the skills that
And
are within
sometimes
their
they'll surprise
routines.
you. They can be more capable sometimes that you think that they can.
We've had kids lead a game.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's cool to see.
Anything else, ladies?
I can't think of anything right off the top of my head. I think we covered a lot. Just want to thank you, Scott, for having
Yeah,
us
thank you.
today.
Yeah.
And anytime anyone would like to come into the classroom and see classroom engagement model in action, we'd always welcome them.
That would be great. I think I want to thank the 4 of you for being here today and sharing information, not just about CEM, but about everything that's happening with, or some things that are happening with our youngest learners, if you will, and exciting things. A lot of collaborating, a lot of new learning. The reflecting is really exciting. Engaged students, independent learners. A lot of phrases I heard that I think all parents out there and community members watching can go, wow, those are great things happening in early childhood in the Marshall Public Schools. So thank you for being here today and for everything that you do, and keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, this is Superintendent Scott Monson on Tiger Talk TV. Thanks a lot for watching our show, and as Tiffany indicated, feel free to contact her and stop in and see exciting things happening, not just in early childhood, but really in every part of our school district. Thank you.